watching the healthcare sector because it's ever changing, lots of deals that are happening. And what are some themes for 2024? A lot of the guests that come on choose healthcare as a sector that will likely do well in 2024. Let's find out what these guys have to say. So we have Brian Tanquilut with us, healthcare equity analyst at Jefferies, and Sel Hardy, vice president, senior equity research analyst at CFRA. Sel, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on the big picture here for 2024. Any predictions?
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me. So we think 2023 was a difficult year for the healthcare sector, and leaving this behind, we expect 2024 to be the year of gradual recovery, especially for biopharma. As you may know, despite its defensive nature, the sector has been weaker compared to other sectors since the beginning of the year. The S&P 500 healthcare index was down by 5% year to date, which compares to the S&P 500's performance of 15 plus gain during the same period. And especially the pharma and biotech industries have been weaker compared to other sectors since the beginning of the year. And we think this is related to COVID-19 tailwind reversals and issues related to biotech funding earlier in the year. But that said, when we look at the performance of the 10 sub-industries individually within the healthcare sector over the last year, we noticed there were significant differences in the performances. For example, like healthcare supplies, healthcare facilities, and healthcare distributors were the best performers, while healthcare services, healthcare technology, and life science tools and services were the worst performers year to date. Following the announcement of the initial list of the top 10 selling prescription drugs subject to negotiations with Medicare Part D in the third quarter of the year, we saw some pressure on large caps, and we think this is still somewhat there. But looking ahead with expectations for improved revenue performance throughout 2024 as the comparison base gets easier versus 2023, and with the anticipated margin improvements driven by cost initiatives taken throughout the year, we think the gradual recovery should be in the cards.
Okay, Sel, and I know in the note I saw that you had Eli Lilly, Merck, and Pfizer as some top picks. I also wanted to ask you about Ozempic. But Brian, you have some big picture thoughts to going into 2024, and naming a name like HCA Healthcare is also on the Jefferies radar. Tell us about that.
Hey, Nicole, thanks for having me this morning. So as we think about 2024, just a few kind of like high-level thoughts, right? I mean, elections obviously will be top of mind for a lot of investors, especially as it relates to healthcare. I think the macro market performance also will factor in because healthcare is generally viewed as a defensive space. So I think that if we see some weakness in the broader markets and the equity markets, you might see some incremental strength in healthcare, especially for the more defensive names like the drug distributors such as McKesson, and also a hospital operator like HCA. Now, taking that aside, some of the other thoughts or areas of focus I think for 2024 will be GLP-1s, the diabetes drugs will remain in focus. I think healthcare utilization, broadly speaking, we've seen some strength this year. Exiting COVID, there was a lot of pent-up demand that flowed through to the healthcare providers. It will be interesting to see how utilization holds up next year, especially against some tough comps. Labor is another issue that we're watching closely. Healthcare was one of the areas that struggled quite a bit, especially in the early part of 2023 with labor pressures. So as the economy softens a little bit, I think the labor pressures on healthcare providers will start to ease. So a lot of moving parts for healthcare. But again, if we're looking at a defensive space, this could be a pretty good year, 2024, for a lot of the healthcare provider names in the space.
Yeah. And HCA, that you talked about the solid company fundamentals and said that this is obviously a top pick, a name that you like. I want to talk about, you have a slew of names. I see 5-6 names on here, Brian. I want to touch on some of the other ones. But Sel, let's continue to talk about the diabetes drugs and Ozempic and Wegovy and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, where do we stand on that? Do you see any benefits for some of these drug makers?
We expect continued strong demand for obesity treatments during 2024, and we actually see Eli Lilly becoming an even more valuable company throughout the year, especially the diabetic drug Mounjaro, which was just launched last year, is expected to see world sales grow at the record CAGR of 87% during 2022 to 2028 period. So we think this is really eye-catching, and we think following Lilly's Zepbound that was recently approved in the United States for chronic weight management, we think Lilly will continue to absorb the strong demand for these type of treatments. We think the addressable market is quite large, and we expect already that the treatment will generate more than $2 billion in revenue in its first full year of sales in 2024.
Yeah. And so quickly, Brian, you have Tenet Healthcare, you have RadNet, you have Encompass, you have HCA, you have a few more on here. Just your final thoughts on the other great ones. You have McKesson on here.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with that, right? So to the point earlier, I think GLP-1s will remain an area of focus. McKesson is a big distributor of GLP-1s, so we will still see some volumes flowing through for those guys. And again, it's a very defensive name, so in times of market volatility, McKesson will outperform. I called out RadNet and Tenet as some of the growth names in the space. They're benefiting from trends such as the movement of procedures, healthcare procedures out of hospitals into outpatient settings that are cheaper. And RadNet is an AI play. We haven't talked about AI yet. I mean, it seems like we forgot about AI, but it's still in people's radar screens, especially as we think about 2024. And RadNet is one of the good ways to play AI in healthcare, where it is revenue positive, earnings positive coming out of 2024. So that's one of our top picks. And then behavioral health, Nicole, is one of the areas that we really like, especially into next year. As you know, there's a lot of funding going into behavioral health here in the U.S. So Acadia Healthcare is one of our focus names for that as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Brian Tanquilut of Jefferies, sell Hardy CFRA Research.